Welcome. I'm Anne Brandman, the director of the University of Hawaii Kids First Film Festival, presented by Outreach College. And before we start today's live stream, I'd like to wish the National Kids First a happy 30th anniversary. And thanks a lot for helping to make our 14 festivals in Hawaii possible. Today, I'm speaking with Laura Margulies, who is an award-winning animator here in Hawaii. 3 of her films are streaming during the festival through February 21st. They are Blue Cooler, HEPA, and Rolling Down Like Pele. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Anne. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me as part of Kids First.
It's great to see you, Laura. I'm going to say a little bit about you first, so please indulge me before I start asking you the tough questions. With more than 30 years in the animation world, Laura has an extensive body of both personal and professional work. Her vivid hand-painted animations have screened in festivals worldwide, and her commission work has shown on television stations like PBS, CBS, MTV, HBO, Sundance, and others. And she has the, I think, unique distinction of having been a designer and colorist for Beavis and Butthead. Laura is currently an assistant professor at the University of Hawaii at the Academy of Creative Media. So let's find out more about Laura from Laura herself. Ready?
Sure. Thank you, Anne. Thanks for that great introduction.
Sure, it's all true. Okay, so Laura, your work has been described as moving paint, and it combines your passion for both your passion for dance and for movement and painting. And so this is really a chicken and the egg question. So what I'm trying to find out from you is which came first, or did they come together, or how did you combine these passions? And then how did it become animation as the next form?
That is such a good question, Anne. And it's things that I think about a lot. So I love this question. When I was young, I did a lot of dance, and I also did a lot of artwork. And I was always sort of pulled and torn, which one do I want to go into? And I like playing with paint. I like color. I like, creating artwork, visual artworks that have a lot of movement in them. And then, in high school, I did a lot of dancing, and I studied with the well-known dancer Betty Jones, who lived in Hawaii for many years. And she was with the Jose Limon Dance Company. And I learned so much about dance and elevating the quality of movement and how important, small movements can be. And so that had a very strong impact on me. And when I went to the University of Hawaii, I took classes with a teacher named Robert Rodek, and he taught classes called Image in Motion, and they were in the photography department. And those classes were sort of, aha moments when I realized that I could combine my love of art with this love of dance. And so I made a few animated films at that time. And I was also playing, during when I was in college, I was also playing with the idea of bringing artwork into choreography, because I was also experimenting with choreography and performance. So there were a number of things that I liked about, sort of starting to work in film. I did not like in choreography and performance, I didn't like the temporality of it. I didn't like that you would work so long and so hard to present a piece, and then it was gone. And so when I realized that I could film it and then I could manipulate the images, that was kind of a big thing for me. I also liked the idea that I could take a small piece of movement and heighten that with animation. So I could, instead of a little movement getting lost, I could sort of elevate it and present it in different ways. So, there were just so many intriguing things that I discovered by combining these two passions.
Well, that's so interesting, Laura. And you take me back, living here in Hawaii and being at the University of Hawaii, to some of your mentors being really important names here as well. So you learned from some really great folks as well. Well, since you've described your process of how you got to doing your painterly animation that focuses a lot on dance, can you describe the actual process of creating your animations from concept to paint to animation to, and I believe you use stop motion, even live action. Can you describe that a little bit? And maybe also give us a sense of how long this process takes.
Okay. Well, let me just say that the process is always evolving. So whatever idea I start with, I sort of have to modify the process to accommodate the idea. But in the basic thing the basic way that I work with animation is I paint, and I paint with real paints. I like to work with oil paints. There is a style of animation called paint on glass, which a Canadian animator named Caroline Leaf is really famous for doing, and other people as well use it. I started doing paint on glass. Sometimes the lighting is backlit, so you get like a glow. But I've kind of evolved my process so that now I'm painting on canvas boards. And you're right, Anne, it is a stop motion method. So I'm making a painting, and then I have a camera that's mounted above the artwork. And the camera is a digital camera nowadays, as opposed to back when I made two of the films which you are showing in the festival, which were shot on film, on 16 millimeter film. But Blue Cooler was shot using a digital Canon camera, and the camera is hooked up directly to my computer, which captures frames. So basically, I'm making a painting, taking a frame, and the computer saves that image, and then I change the painting a little tiny bit, and I take another picture. And that goes on and on and on for 24 frames in a second. That's actually not completely true, because I cheat, and I usually work on what animators call twos. So I do 12 paintings per second. So that's still a lot, and it still takes a long time. I'm working on an animated painting right now, and I get about 2 seconds of animation done a day. So yeah, Blue Cooler took about 10 years to make. It is truly a labor of love, and it takes some fortitude to stick with it.
Well, I adore your work, and I love the texture and the movement. And for me, it's highly emotional because of those elements, and conveys, I think, an inner life, your inner life, the artist's inner life, that the viewer can relate to. But there are a lot of different forms of animation, especially ones that are popular commercially. And you've worked with a number of animators when you were living in New York. So what is it about this particular form do you like in order to tell your stories? And yeah, I think I'll leave it at that.
Okay, yeah, there's a lot there. I love paint, I love color, and I love motion. So I want to work with those elements in any way I can. And that's not to say that I'm against working with digital software. And in fact, I hope to work more with digital software, but I sometimes just find that working in a traditional method gives me the results that I'm looking for, which, I am kind of proud to say that I'm like almost anti-technology. I mean, I'm not anti-technology. It's wonderful, it's helpful, it's much easier to make films now than it was, 20 years ago. But that said, there's a lot to be said for working with your hands and working with real materials. And so I do like, sort of the intersection of working with tangible materials and working digitally. But there are some other softwares such as TV Paint and Toon Boom that I also try to incorporate. And I'm working on a project now where there's a blending of oil paintings and digital painterly style animation. So it'll be really curious to see how that comes out. That's a group project that I'm working with some animators in town. Okay, so what was the other part of the question? Why do I choose?
That's fun. Actually, now you've got me interested. I want to talk to you a little bit about that project, maybe closer to the end of the interview. But let's focus in then on the films that were streaming during the festival. So let's talk a little bit about HEPA. My experience of HEPA was, I immediately thought of a term that I guess it's in psychology called synesthesia, which is, when you can see sounds and you can hear visuals and they all combine together and give a really, it can either make you crazy or give you a really rich experience of life. And I find that in HEPA, you have dancers moving, and then there's these qualities of the paint that augment the movement of the dancers. And then you bring in live action of the actual dancers. And I studied experimental film, so I love technology too, but I like the old-fashioned use of experimental techniques in the old days, the way filmmakers did. But can you talk a little bit about your inspiration for HEPA?
Yes, I would love to. And I love you bringing up that term synesthesia, because I think that does sort of get to what I'm after. I want to take things that inspire me, and I want to sort of spit them out in a slightly different way. So I would like people to be able to react or interpret, my films and sort of feel what I'm feeling when I'm inspired by something. So, with HEPA, I was living in New York, and I was taking Brazilian dance. And I found the people that I was, with, both the teachers and the drummers and the dancers, to be so, full of life. And they were very, very welcoming. So it was, the drummer was Marivaldo dos Santos, who's with Stomp, and his sister, Rosângela Silvestre, teaches her own style of dance movement called the Silvestre style. And so the two of them, created this wonderful world which welcomed us New Yorkers. At the time I was a New Yorker, even though I'm from Hawaii, they welcomed us in, and we got to learn Brazilian dance. And even beyond that, we learned Brazilian drumming too. I went to drumming classes, and I went to Brazil, and we, danced in the carnival. And I, got to experience Orisha ceremonies and Brazilian parties. And it was sort of all consuming. And I was, in my 20s. And so it was a very fun and lively time of my life. And so I wanted to, take something from that experience and process it in my own way through this moving paint and through this live action film, and then sort of like put it out there again. And so I tried to capture this vitality and this excitement that I was experiencing in this Brazilian culture.
I must say, I think you did, because the music is fantastic, but the feeling of the music and the rhythm and the visual just add up to something really amazing. And I have to say, when I grow up, I want to be just like you, because it sounds like you've had a lot of interesting life experiences that you can put into your artwork. So let me ask you then about Rolling Down Like Pele, because that is a different kind of look at both Hawaiian hula and chant. so it actually lends those elements lend themselves to the kind of work that you do and broaden it even more. But I noticed as well that there was another element that I felt was very strong in that film, and it's something that we in Hawaii feel a great deal, and that's the presence of nature and the effect of the environment,
Hmm.
and how that informs both music, chant, hula, etc. So can you tell me a little bit about how maybe coming home to Hawaii has changed your work or informed it differently, and in what ways?
Sure. Well, it's interesting that you bring up the idea of nature in Rolling Down Like Pele, because I hadn't actually thought about that, but you're right, it is there. The story with the making of Rolling Down Like Pele is that I was living in New York and I had received a fellowship for dance on film at UCLA. So I went out to LA for 3 months. And within this wonderful program directed by Judy Matoma, I was sort of put together with a halau run by Kumuhula Sisi Ka'io. And so I got to kind of dive in and study the dance and the chant. And so the Rolling Down Like Pele evolved out of my experiences with this halau in California. So I was feeling very homesick for Hawaii. And I think that comes through in that film. There's a lot of aloha for the movements that do evoke nature, and for the beautiful chants. I also had a chant in there from Keali'i Rachel, which was, where the halau danced to that as well. So that was very nice. So that was sort of a love song to Hawaii from afar.
Yeah.
But then I moved home in 2008, and that's when I sort of began working on the film Blue Cooler.
Right.
And that was sort of like a kind of a coming to terms with being back. I grew up in Hawaii. I had a lot of memories. And then coming back in 2008, I actually started this film, I think in 2011 or 12. I can't remember when, but I saw things that were the same as that I remember from a childhood. And I saw a lot of things that were different. And so it was a love song to Hawaii again, Blue Cooler, but I wanted to bring up things that I was worried about, issues, or, for example, I show, people dumping garbage. And this is something that, a lot of the images in Blue Cooler are things that I observed in my neighborhood, really literally in my neighborhood. There's a sign down the street that said, "Please no dumping." And then people would start dumping. And it's exactly like in Blue Cooler, except, I took it to another level by adding, a VW bug to that pile. But that's the kind of thing that sort of triggered my my observations and my wanting to put those into paint and to add sounds and to make it an experience that people could sort of feel and relate to.
Oh, that's so interesting. I'm really glad you talked about Blue Cooler, because I do see it as, for anybody who lives here, it's a slice of life in Hawaii that's both ordinary and unique to Hawaii, I think. But it's certainly recognizable, and I think you use the soundtrack a great deal to bring the sounds that we all hear in Hawaii, and so that adds even more of a dimension to your work. So thanks for talking about that. We're getting close to a time where we're going to have questions from the audience, but let me just ask you, because maybe there are some prospective filmmakers watching this. It's hard usually for artists to navigate the commercial world. It isn't always easy to combine those two, and yet you do both commissions and you are an artist. So how did these commissions come your way? Do you actively pursue them, or do people come to you? Just to give a sense of hope to people who are out there who are artists, but also maybe want to get a little work from it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there's lots of different aspects to this. I guess in my past, I sort of pursued commercial work more actively than I do now. It seems to sort of come to me more frequently now. You know, and also people will come to me wanting my style, which is nice, because as a younger animator, you know, people will want animation, but it might be something completely different. So in a way that was kind of good too, because I was, you know, sort of forced to try to learn different styles and to give people what they wanted. But yeah, it's sort of a mixture of both. But
so, I mean, I guess what I want to say to you filmmakers out there is learn all you can about your craft and then follow your heart and your passion. And if you build it, they will come, though it's not always easy. How's that?
Yes,
Does that sum it up?
good. That sounds good.
And be unique, be yourself. So, well, enough of my advice. I guess just want to mention that you do teach at the University of Hawaii. How do you find time to do your own work, or do you?
It's a balancing act. You know, it really is. And like I said, if it takes me 2 seconds, you know, for one day, a whole day to do 2 seconds of animation, it is hard to find time, but it's just part of it. And, you know, making new work is stimulating, and it also helps me to be a better teacher. So I try and always be making something.
Well, thank you, Laura, for answering all of my questions. I feel like we've gotten a master class in animation from you, and we have some questions from our viewers, which I'm going to read and give you a little time to answer.
Sure.
First question is from, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Barsi. What in your wildest imagination would you do if a major studio came to you and gave you carte blanche to create a film for them?
I've thought about that question actually, and I don't know. I mean, I definitely would. I don't know. There's lots of different possibilities. You know, I might, in terms of doing a single film for them, I'm not really sure. That would definitely be something painterly and something that has some kind of emotional content, probably a little bit on the experimental side. You know, I like story. I love story. I love watching story, but in my own work, I'm sort of more attracted to, you know, like Anne, to a little bit more of the experimental stuff. But if a big studio came to me, perhaps I would curate short films that don't get seen, just like they're doing here at Kids First, although I think many of these films do get seen quite a bit. But, you know, I find that there's such great work being made out there. And so maybe I would, you know, try and present that kind of work.
It's very altruistic. As a curator, I think that's a wonderful idea. And thanks for that question, Barsi. That's a great question. The next question is from Judy, and it's a little personal. Do you ever take on interns? Judy has a friend who loves to make animation, and she thinks she would love working with you. She doesn't live in Hawaii, but she does visit there often. So do you take on interns?
I have only had one intern, and it was a really great experience. So I am open to the idea.
Okay, Judy, it's time to get in touch with your friend and make sure she signs on to our festival and watches Laura's films and any of the other films that she finds inspiring. So that's some good news. The next question is from Fernando. And Fernando says, I love these films of yours that we watched here. Where do your ideas come from when you start on a new film? Where can we find more of your work? And have you ever made a feature film?
Well, thank you, Fernando. That's so nice of you. And thank you for watching the films. Okay, I have a website. It's ukelelepictures.com. Otherwise, it's also lauramargulies.com. So, and I have, you know, a little bit more of my work on that website. Where do the ideas come from? You know, they come from different places, but they usually start with sort of not a very complex idea. You know, so Blue Cooler came from, I wanted to make sort of a like a patchwork quilt of ideas and observations from my experiences in Hawaii. I'm thinking about making a film based on some footage that I have of my kids. You know, so really simple ideas that sort of invoke, you know, like joy or humor or something. So a spark. And you know, it is a really great question, and I find that I have ideas all the time, and I'm often inspired, and I could see making a film from those ideas. And I get confused when students sort of say, I don't know what to make a film about, because to me, I find that there's, you know, hundreds of ideas out there. When I lived in New York, I encountered all kinds of people, and you know, just a single person could be the spark for an idea. You know, if they're interesting, you could, you know, make a whole little short film just about one interesting person, or a place, or a feeling, or an experience. Oh, and a feature film. I have not wanted to make a feature film because I thought that would be too hard.
It would take you how many years?
It would take me like, yeah, 50
100
years.
years. Well, we never know. Something might come up. Some new technology that mixes with your passions might come up.
It's true. It's true. Never say never.
Just want to ask you real quickly, do you think people can be taught creativity since you're a teacher?
Yes. I mean, I think everybody has the potential, and I also think everybody can draw. But people are afraid to sort of start and to give themselves the space and, you know, to make mistakes and to try things. So yes, I believe that everyone has creative potential, and you just need to give yourself some little time and space and encouragement, and it'll come out.
Thank you, Laura. Thanks for speaking with us. We've been talking with Laura Margulies, whose hand-painted animated films will be streaming at the UH Kids First Film Festival through February 21st. You have time to watch them as well as other films and rewatch them again. And we really encourage you. We're taking people's votes for their favorite films in different categories. Love to give Laura one of the Kids First laurels on her films. So please vote for Laura's films if you enjoyed them and you want to see more of her work. Vote, vote, vote. You can vote all through the festival, and then on President's Day, we have, since we know everybody has a day off, you have a whole day to catch up on anything you didn't watch, and you can vote, not for president, but for your favorite films. So I want to thank everybody who's been watching, and thank you for your great questions, everyone. And on behalf of Kids First and UH Outreach College, I thank you, mahalo, and aloha.
Aloha, mahalo, and Kids First.